In a hair salon in a busy city centre, 20-year-old Holly Gazzard is attacked.
Holly'd been stabbed multiple times, he said. At least 14 times in the neck, the heart and the chest.
She's been murdered, and a prime suspect emerges. It's her former lover.
At that point, we were unaware of where he'd gone, but there were concerns, he was a rejected stalker.
Determined to find Holly's killer, detectives uncover evidence including surveillance footage that could be vital to their case.
We've got CCTV wandering around the town, but almost with a purpose, almost as though he's psyching himself up.
Detectives gather evidence until a picture of a suspect emerges. Which piece of the puzzle will reveal who is guilty of murder? What will be a killer's mistake? In Gloucester, police are called to a crime scene. A brutal attack in a hair salon.
I was the late turn duty detective inspector when we had a call from the control room to let us know that an incident had occurred, that a female had been assaulted. And at that point, the call to police then recorded that Holly was being assaulted. I'm not sure they were aware that she was being stabbed at that point.
When first attending officers arrive, the seriousness of the crime is immediately clear.
My uniformed colleagues that would have been sent to the scene, and when they arrived, they would be the ones that would be making the initial assessment, sending things through back to the control room.
20-year-old Holly Gazzard has been stabbed 14 times.
She had multiple stab wounds over her torso. It was quite extensive. We had tents put up and we arranged for our scenes of crime to attend. The first point of call was that there were a number of witnesses, some who were very young in the hairdressers, that we really needed. They were our significant witnesses, so we needed to get them interviewed as soon as possible. So we arranged that to happen on the night, and they were taken by specially trained officers to have their evidence visually recorded.
Holly's fellow hairdressers tell detectives that they believe they know who's responsible.
So we were initially given some names. So the lady that gave the information on the phone, who called it in, had given the name. She'd used the name Asher Rose, which I believe was the name that was on his Facebook page. And we obviously had Holly's name, so we interrogated our systems to make sure that we got the right person.
Police background checks reveal Asher Rose is the pseudonym of a 22-year-old whose real name is Asher Maslin.
We could see that he'd got a violent background. So there were other information that we'd got there and other things he's been investigated for and had previously been investigated for. So, yeah, we could ascertain that point that he was a danger.
Security cameras capture Maslin on the run. Can police catch him before he strikes again?
At that point, we were unaware of where he'd gone. And as far as we were at that point, he was still armed with a knife.
Holly's life hangs in the balance. Police must break the news to her family.
They kept working on Holly till they got to the hospital. And it was that point, obviously, that we made the decision that we needed to contact family. So I had sent 2 officers to the home address of Holly to inform, because I felt really strongly that, we need the family there.
We were having tea around Holly's sister's house. So, I was at their house and I had to go back to our house to pick up something which I'd forgotten. And as I came out of the front door, I saw a car parked across the drive, and I thought that was a bit strange. And two people then started to walk towards me. And again, I thought, really strange. And they said, "Are you Nick Gazzard?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have a daughter called Holly?" My heart sunk, and I thought, something's happened to Holly here. I said, "Yeah, please come inside." He said, "Well, can you sit down, please, sir? We got some news we need to tell you."
We were aware that it was unlikely that Holly was going to pull through, that it was likely that she was going to die, and that was the prognosis from the ambulance.
The police then took us to Gloucester Royal, took us into a room whereby we waited for about half an hour, and then the consultant came in, and I could see him shaking. And he said, "I've got some bad news for you." And he had to tell us that, Holly'd been stabbed multiple times, he said, at least 14 times in the neck, the heart, and the chest. He said, "The only crumb of comfort I can give you is that after the first one or two blows, she probably wouldn't have been aware of it."
Holly Gazzard dies just after 6 o'clock on February 18th. Her family is left reeling from the news, but police must deliver another warning. The attacker has also made direct threats against them.
From the moment the police walked down the drive, it was like being in a movie, and you were being fast-tracked everywhere. And because obviously he made the threats, he even sent Chloe's partner a text after he'd murdered Holly, and he said something like, "It did not have to end like this, you made me do it."
We were under armed officers at the hospital because obviously he'd threatened us as a family, so we were then moved.
They took us back to our house under armed escort, and we had to pick up Holly's dog, and we had to go out to a safe house.
We had, at that point, ensured that Holly's family were taken somewhere safe and not returned to the family home, which was quite distressing for us because that was where Holly lived. So for us, they'd not only lost their daughter, but we were then telling them, "You can't go home until we locate." So that was extra worry and stress for them.
While Holly's family struggles to cope with her loss, police intensify their hunt for the man that they believe is responsible.
And as far as we were at that point, he was still armed with a knife. So wheels put in motion in then to try and locate him. Had armed officers that were out doing checks because, at that point he was an armed offender, that he was, a violent offender.
As armed officers search for Maslin, they talk to Holly's family to work out exactly who he is to them and how Holly had brought him into their lives.
She got a job in a local nightclub called Zest, and it was there that she met Asha Maslin.
She was working there part-time alongside her hairdressing. She enjoyed the music there, and I think she just enjoyed the buzz of it.
The family tells detectives that when they first meet him, they know Maslin as a young man with a troubled history.
She said, "Dad, can I bring someone home to the house?" I said, "Of course you can, Holly, it's your house, you do what you like." And when she brought him in, my wife said, "Oh no, not him," because she knew of him from the school that my wife worked at. And she remembered that he was not of good character at the school. So, I think she was a bit wary, but, I always give people a second chance. So I just said, okay, well, let's see how, things happening.
They were the kind of family where this is Holly's boyfriend, we will be welcoming. This is Holly's choice, we will support her. Very loving family. But they had their concerns right from the beginning.
He was, very nice to her, always wanting to be with her, couldn't do enough for her. And I think for Holly, that probably was something that she found quite attractive to start off with.
He was that charming character that Holly would go for, because she had a similar type of personality in terms of outgoing, social, and they were very similar in that respect. And I think that's why she was attracted to him.
It developed very, very quickly, maybe something that kind of caught up with her rather than something that she expected straight away.
If eyewitness testimony is correct, and Maslin is the man who's responsible for killing Holly, motive will be key to police and prosecutors proving their case. Why would he kill Holly? They will learn that Holly wanted him out of her life.
Holly sort of said to me quite a few times, Dad, I want to get rid of this guy. I don't want to be with him anymore. He's a bit of pain, I just want to be myself. I want to be Holly. I want to get back to doing the things I wanted to do with my friends.
He became a stalker. And he was a rejected stalker, which is one of the ones that are quite concerning.
And some of the things that she would tell us, things like if she broke up with him, then his family would get her. He would kill himself if she broke up with him. So he was putting that real guilt trip on Holly, and that blackmail, and lots of other things.
Police discover that before Holly met Maslin, she was in a good place. She comes from a close-knit family.
It was a very fun household. It was a loving household, and it's an enjoyable one. And I really did enjoy the girls growing up. Holly was very sporty.
Holly had lots of friends. She had lots of acquaintances. She worked different places, so she knew lots of people. And she was always a busybody. She's always doing something. She was never kind of sat down resting.
When she turned into a teenager, she started to get involved in fashion. Hair, makeup, clothes. And I think the hair was the way that she wanted to go, because she was a ginger. She was proud ginger, she said. But she could change the way she looks just by altering her hair, whether that's style, whether it was colour. So I think that gave her the bug.
She didn't really want any responsibilities as such, so she wanted to be able to go out and do things by herself, experience the world, meet new people, travel, and really just experience her life how she wanted to, because travelling was her key.
We sat down one day and said, how do you want to travel? And we talked about it, and she came up with the idea of, about a cruise ship, because it can combine her hairdressing, which she just qualified as, and travelling. And that's what she started. She contacted a company called Steiner. She had the interview and she got the job. And that's when she had to pack her job in at the local salon, because she had to move to London at a minute's notice.
It's at Zest nightclub that Holly first meets Maslin.
We were under the impression that she was going off on the cruise ships and that she didn't really want to be with anybody. She'd split from a previous boyfriend, and he was so lovely, because she wanted to go on this cruise ship and they didn't want it to get in the way.
I think when they were in this relationship together, she knew she was moving to London, and then she was going on the cruise ship. She had a big plan for herself. She was a hairdresser. All of this was in place. I honestly do not think that Holly saw a future with Maslin, and she did, in fact, go off to London to go on the cruise ship. I think she thought he was okay, he was quite nice. She'd go out with him a few times, but she was moving to London anyway. This wasn't going to ever be a long-term thing for her. I don't think she fell for him.
Holly hasn't fallen for Maslin, but he has fallen for her.
Asher Maslin would have done the whole love bombing thing, and, they can keep that up for a short time, and they can focus all their attention on you.
Holly's dream of travelling the world does nothing to deter him.
In 2 weeks, she was off to London to train to go on the cruise ship. But what happened then was that Asher Maslin had followed her to London. He didn't have a job, he didn't have anywhere to stay, and he tried to build that relationship while she was in London training to go on the cruise ship.
He followed her up there as he had family in Watford, so he managed to kind of stay there and mingle around. I don't think he was working.
He followed her and he stalked her.
Holly couldn't have known, but police records reveal Maslin has a criminal record.
But Holly would not have known that Maslin had a very significant record of violence going back years. He had a history of violence towards girlfriends and stalking.
We could see that he'd got a violent background. So there were other information that we'd got there and other things he's been investigated for and had previously been investigated for. We could ascertain that point that he was a danger.
By the time he meets Holly, Maslin has already been arrested over 20 times for various offences, including abuse against a person.
He is looking for someone to own, somebody to be in a long-term possession type situation with. Completely different to her. Completely different.
You have this image of stalkers as are people that are strangers that follow you. Well, actually, it's a lot more if you're fixated, obsessed, and wanted and repeated, which is what Asher was. His behaviour, and so it's difficult to know how to deal with that.
Holly's family know that Maslin is troubled, but they don't know the extent of his criminal history.
I used to think that he maybe wanted a lot from her, but that also seemed quite nice at the time, and what they spent doing. They spent a lot of time together, which again seemed lovely.
Her job on the cruise ship will put distance between her and Maslin.
When Holly was training to go on the cruise ships, she was training for about 5 weeks. She then got the call to go on the ship. It was a celebration, part of the Carnival line going around the Bahamas. And she telephoned us, and we were so excited for her, as she was. And we had to take her to Heathrow to catch a flight.
In March 2013, Holly sets off for Miami to catch a cruise ship, and Maslin is there to see her off.
Whilst we were packing the car, Maslin suddenly turned up, which we found really strange because we didn't even know that he was staying in London. And she said something like, "Oh, don't worry, Daddy's just come to see me off, that's all." So again, we didn't think any more of it. We were driving her to Heathrow, she was on a flight, and then she had a contract for 9 months. When we took her to Heathrow, we waved bye-bye, we were quite upset because we weren't going to see her for 9 months. So we travelled back to Gloucester and thought, yeah, absolutely. She telephoned us a few times to say, she'd arrived at Miami and then she was on her ship. So that was great. We had no concerns whatsoever about Holly being away for 9 months because she was that type of individual. She was strong. She was someone who could go into a room and she would make friends very, very easily. So we had no qualms whatsoever that cruise ship was not right for her because of the type of personality she was.
Just a week into the cruise, the family receives a call.
We got a telephone call. And Holly just said, "Dad, can you arrange flights to get me back to Gloucester because I want to come home?" We thought that was really strange because, she was a strong individual and she'd been planning it for months, but we couldn't understand why she suddenly wanted to come back. We didn't question her, we didn't quiz her because, she was 3,000 miles away. We didn't want to upset her. She was only 19 at that stage. So we arranged the flights, got her back. And my wife went to pick her up at the airport and we got her back to Gloucester.
At the time, it seems cruise life just wasn't right for Holly, but Jane Monkton-Smith believes it's more likely that Maslin is manipulating her.
He was constantly contacting her and, he wore her down. We can only imagine the kinds of things that he was saying to her to make her feel guilty and awful. And she felt so bad, in fact, that she came back. She came back off the cruise ship and she went back to her family in Gloucestershire. And he followed her there. He was obsessed. This is the thing about stalkers. They are all fixated and obsessed, and they don't listen to reason.
After returning to Gloucester, it isn't long before Holly decides to head back to London.
She said to us that I really love being in London. I like that fast pace that they have for fashion and that passion that she has for fashion, you know, hairdressing and things. And she said, I really want to go back to London, Dad, to be in that environment. So we said, fine, you know, why don't you go back? You know, because she was a strong person. There was no reason why Holly wouldn't be able to cope on her own.
Maslin has plans to go to London too, and to move in with Holly.
And it didn't take long for him to kind of follow her up there. Holly was working in Watford and living in Watford as well. They shared a bedsit. It was like a little flat. They had all their bits and bobs in there, and she used to go out to work. I'm not sure what he did, whether he did or not. And she used to just go back to this, I think it was quite a dingy little flat, and it wasn't really, I think, what she wanted. It was getting intense quite quickly, buying each other things, but he provided her with a car, and she just turned up in it one day and didn't really know what to make of it, but it suited her. It definitely suited her. But I think it was on the provisory that she had to take him where he wanted and pick him up when he wanted, because he bought her the car.
Holly's father tells investigators that he didn't know Maslin was in London with his daughter.
When we went up to London to take Holly out for lunch, because obviously we hadn't seen her for a couple of months because she'd moved back to London. And when we got there, she told us that Maslin had, you know, followed her back to London, which, again, we thought was quite strange because we didn't know they were in that relationship. And when we saw her and took her out, she was quite a different person. You know, she was quite subdued. She didn't look happy. She wasn't that fun-loving, you know, bubbly character that she usually was. A couple of strange things happened during that dinner hour. You know, her phone was constantly ringing. You know, we asked her a few times, you know, who is it? She said, it's him, you know, he's just ringing me. And one call, we heard him say, don't let them take you home. We never thought anything of it, but obviously he was frightened that she would go back to Gloucester with us, and he would then lose that position of isolation with her, being on her own.
He would have wanted rid of Holly's family, get them away. They're the voice of reason. They're going to say things about me. They're going to tell Holly that I'm a bad person. He's going to want shot of them, and that's when the threats start.
At the same time as analysing Holly's relationship with Maslin, detectives continue their search for him at the same time as trying to keep Holly's family safe. Then, in Gloucester city centre, they find an object.
So the weapon was recovered. He wasn't with him at the time. The knife would have been forensically recovered by our scenes crime officers. It's photographed in situ. It will be then part of a forensic strategy that they will then get that knife examined. There was obviously blood on the knife, so that would obviously need to be checked.
Have detectives found the knife used to kill Holly? Can they link it to Maslin? As the hunt for Holly's killer continues, her family is still under guard in a safe house. They share more details about her relationship with Maslin. And worrying reports emerge.
It was obviously a very toxic relationship. I was picking up on something and wanted to talk to her about making sure she was safe and that she didn't have to be with him if she didn't want to be. But she was adamant that she did, and she told me kind of keep my nose out of it. But I was always there for her if she needed it.
In May of 2013, you know, we invited Holly back for my wife's birthday. And she came back for the weekend and he came back with her. We were having a birthday party at the local restaurant, so we also invited him because, you know, he was with Holly and there was no reason for us not to. We were all sat at the restaurant waiting, and an hour went by and he then suddenly appeared. And he'd been drinking, he was drunk really. And when he got into the restaurant, we saw a very different side to Maslin. He was manipulative, he was aggressive. Just a horrible person to be around.
I don't ever think she wanted to maybe noticed that there was something that she didn't see straight away, because she was a very strong character. She liked to do stuff by herself, independent. If you tried to tell her, she wouldn't necessarily accept it straight away.
Forensic criminologist Jane Monckton-Smith believes that Maslin is likely manipulating events behind the scenes at this time.
When you know somebody's quite dangerous, you then have to be very careful how you respond to them and what you say to them and how you say it. And sometimes it can be safer to keep them on side until you've got a path out.
As the relationship deepens, detectives begin to see a chilling pattern emerge.
Well, Holly went to the Notting Hill Carnival at the end of August with him and quite a few members of his family, extended family, who were in London. And from what we understand is that Holly was separated from him and she was looking after his young cousin, and she took his young cousin to toilet. And because she did that and he couldn't find her, when he did find her, what we now know is he floored her. Whether that was he kicked her or he punched her, but obviously she'd been hit to the ground.
Holly contacted me from Notting Hill Carnival. She said, he's floored me. I want to come home. I don't think the carnival was the first time, but I think it would have been the first time that she would have been shocked by it, because I think he put her to the floor. I think he'd kicked her up the bum a few times and made comments about her and not made her feel very nice. But I think that was probably the first physical one that she'd encountered that maybe frightened her.
I was a bit angry, but it was a case of don't push Holly too much, because you didn't want to push her away. Similarly, when she was in London, you don't want to ask too many questions because you don't want to isolate them away from you.
We'd made arrangements for the next day for my dad to go down and get her, bring her back, bring all her stuff. And obviously, by coincidence, he was back the same day or the next day back in Gloucester.
As investigators build a fuller picture of their relationship, they begin gathering the evidence they may need to present to a jury, including Maslin's violent attacks on Holly and threats that he'd made to her family during their relationship.
Would have been really frightening for her, to want to protect her family, and the guilt that she might feel because she's brought this person into their lives is such a burden to carry.
Unwilling to risk her family's safety or her own, Holly keeps seeing Maslin on and off.
A few times she tried to end the relationship with him, and he said, I'm going to commit suicide and my family will blame you. They'll come after you and it'll be all your fault. I remember he had to get mentally assessed once, and I think she took him.
We found out that Maslin came back to Gloucester, the day that we went to collect Holly. He asked his family to go and pick him up and bring him back to Gloucester. So she didn't even get a break from him. And again, that relationship started. He got his claws into her and he started to build that relationship again.
By the end of 2013, back in Gloucester, Holly and Maslin have rekindled their relationship. There's no sign of control or conflict.
She got back to her old self and she seemed to be very happy. She didn't see him that often. We saw him occasionally, and he was the gift of the gab type person. He had that swagger. He knew how to handle people in that public environment.
But beneath the surface, Holly is striving for her own space.
Then she got the job at the King Teddy because she wanted a bit of extra money, because obviously hairdressers, they don't earn that much money. That's what we thought, but we understand that. One of the reasons why she got that job is because Maslin then couldn't see her in the evenings, because obviously he wanted to be with her a lot.
Investigators uncover details about his behaviour at this time via co-workers like Ellie Anderson.
Holly started working with us at the Teddy, which is a pub in Gloucester, in November, December time. I was there working as a supervisor, so I trained Holly up and worked alongside her while she was there. We had a really nice group at the Teddy at that point. We were majority girls, so we all got on really, really well. She was brilliant. She was always there with the customers, having a good banter with them, having a laugh. She didn't take herself too seriously, which was really nice. I knew that she was seeing somebody, that it wasn't that great at the time when she was at the pub. He'd tried to come in a few times and we ended up barring him from the pub just because he was making it miserable for her while she was there. I think he'd been quite argumentative with somebody that was talking to Holly and ordering drinks at the time, and it was just making her miserable and just creating an atmosphere whilst he was there. She wouldn't say so much that he was threatening her, but it would be more that his actions just weren't very nice. She wouldn't particularly say what.
Detectives are building a profile of the suspect, a man who assaults, stalks, and refuses to give Holly any space. It's this behaviour that police learn makes Holly confront Maslin herself.
Holly was a really lovely person. I don't think she would ever want to make anybody feel upset or hurt.
On February the 14th, 2014, Holly arranges a showdown with Maslin.
So why don't you take him to a public place and really give him that message that it's over? She said, great, Dad. I'll take him to the local hotel. And that's what she did on February the 14th. She took him to a hotel. She told him that it was over. And she finally got the message through to him.
On the day that she sat down with him face to face and had the confidence and the courage to say to him, this is over, there's no going back, I really, really mean it, and she got up and she left, he would have been absolutely in no doubt at that point that no amount of control was ever going to get her back.
Maslin doesn't handle the breakup well.
He threw a glass of water in her face. She ran to her car, he jumped in, put a hand on the handbrake, stopped her going, stole the debit card in the footwell in her handbag, and then waltzed across to the local cash point and withdrew a lot of her money.
There's about £300 that he took out of the bank from her account.
She didn't tell anyone until the next day. She went to bed with that by herself. She went to work the next day, and it wasn't till the weekend that we kind of contacted the police for the theft of the bank card, and then it all went from there.
We picked her up the Saturday evening, again, as we normally did, and then she was quite a different person. And she started to tell us all about what was happening. And some of the things that she would tell us, things like, if she broke up with him, then his family would get her. He would kill himself if she broke up with him.
Maslin's public assault has pushed Holly to her limits. She contacts the police.
She called the police, and I was there giving her that support.
The statement was taken from my mum and dad's dining room at the time, so we sat down there and went through it, kind of in her whole relationship with him. And I learned a lot of disturbing things there. She's obviously disclosing physical abuse, emotional abuse. She's disclosing how many times he'd text her, you know, if he couldn't get hold of her. She'd also say that she'd lost a lot of weight because she was worried to eat as well when they were living in London.
Some of the things that she started to tell them, I could not believe. How he threatened to throw acid in her face to spoil her looks and her career as a hairdresser. How his family would get her if she broke up with him. We were in tears, my wife and I, in terms of what we heard that evening.
After taking Holly's statement, police reassure her that they will work to bring Maslin to justice.
We became aware that on the previous week that Holly had made a report that she'd been assaulted by Asher and that she had had her bank card stolen. There was not the case for that, and they had done a arrest inquiry. So at that point, it was pretty much we knew who we were dealing with.
Holly felt terrified after she gave the statement because they had to obviously go looking for him. They had to try and charge him and arrest him, and she was worried about what he'd do next. Yeah, she was frightened.
We could see that there had been some other incidents where Holly, certainly in the previous year in Gloucester, she had been assaulted by Asher. Holly didn't want to make a complaint at that point. Asher wasn't charged with anything. And then we realised that when we did further digging, that he had previously assaulted her in London at the Notting Hill Carnival. So there was an escalation in his behaviour towards her.
After Maslin assaults Holly and following their public breakup, fears for her safety grow. Friends and colleagues keep a close eye on her.
We had started hearing that she wasn't having a very good time with him, so we just wanted to make sure that she was home safe.
She was obviously frightened. She was very wary of what was around her. She still caught the bus to work. I think she still felt she was quite safe.
At the hair salon where Holly works during the day, her colleagues devise a plan in the event that Maslin shows up.
I think the whole staff were alert to the fact that she'd been having problems with Asher, and I'm pretty sure they knew what happened the previous week where she had been assaulted and had taken her bank card. There was an arrangement with Holly that her friend would contact the police as soon as he turned up.
That's what Holly's colleagues report happens just before 6 p.m. on February 18th.
We understand that Maslin walked into the salon about 10 to 6 at night. He asked for Holly.
So the initial call to police was very much to say he turned up, and at that point the call to police then recorded that Holly was being assaulted.
Holly came out to the front desk. She said to him, you know, please go away, I don't want you here. And then he pulled out a knife, grabbed her left arm and stabbed her.
But once he'd done what he'd done to Holly, who was to say where he was going next and who he was going for, because we were a threat to him, because we'd told her and we'd supported her that she didn't have to be with him if she didn't want to.
It's because they supported Holly that Maslin threatens her family too.
He'd been sending messages, you know, as the last few weeks went by. So we just looked at it and thought, you know, what are you on about? And at this point, he'd actually just killed her and told us that he'd done it and told us that he'd warned us all it didn't have to be this way. And I'll never forget that.
Detectives leave no stone unturned as they continue the hunt for their prime suspect. While searching Maslin's known addresses, they make a significant discovery.
There were various addresses checked. We eventually located him because we were informed where he was by a family member.
And they told the police that he was there, because obviously they were shocked at what he'd done, completely shocked.
His family's decision to cooperate leads to Maslin's arrest at an address in Cheltenham.
We eventually arrested Asher Maslin. He was arrested by armed officers in the early hours of the 19th, so 8 or so hours later.
I think it was about 20 to 2 in the morning that they called us and said they caught him. And that's when we could sort of just breathe a little sigh of relief that he really wasn't coming after us.
With Maslin in custody, the case against him is that police have eyewitness accounts of Holly's murder, the weapon, and his history of offences. Yet he proclaims he is innocent. Police appealed to the public for information. It's then a crucial lead emerges.
Maslin took a DVD player and he sold it. I think it was for £5. He then went across to the local Wilkinson store. He bought a kitchen knife, and then he's been seen walking up and down Gloucester for up to 3 hours on CCTV. The police showed us the CCTV.
It was clear that this wasn't something that he had just, on the spur of the moment, that he had planned it. We've got CCTV wandering around the town, but almost with a purpose, almost as though he's psyching himself up. That's what it looked like. And then going to the hairdressers.
The evidence had come together to convince police and prosecutors that they could get a guilty verdict in the face of Maslin's refusal to accept guilt. In May 2014, Maslin faces pre-trial hearings at Bristol Crown Court.
When we were going to court, at the time, I was absolutely petrified. I mean, he used to just sit there and he would grin and he would stare, and there was no remorse there whatsoever. I remember once just going in and he would just stare at my husband, and making my husband feel quite infuriated that he can actually still do this after he's taken Holly's life.
He showed no emotion. There's no remorse shown by Maslin, and he would stare at members of the family. It was almost, still continuing that behaviour.
It's on his third appearance in court, confronted with CCTV evidence and his own history of violence towards Holly, that Maslin changes his plea.
Maslin eventually admitted his guilt, and he pleaded guilty. And the only good thing about him pleading guilty was that would save us going through a trial. We only had then the sentencing to go to, which was in Gloucester.
The resident judge at Gloucester requested that the sentencing was heard in Gloucester, and it was really impactful when the family read out their victim in personal statements around the impact of Holly's death. There wasn't a dry eye within that courtroom when that was read out.
He wouldn't look at me, and I wanted him to realise what this has done to me and what this has done to my family and the people it's affected.
He was given a life sentence with a minimum of 24 years, which actually is a reasonable sentence on a guilty plea. But do I think it's enough? No, I don't think anyone would ever think it was enough, a sentence for what he did that day.
Whatever he would have got, it was never going to be enough for us. We think about Holly every day. We always talk about Holly. We're very open about Holly, what happened to her and her life. We celebrate the 20 years that she was here with us, but we also celebrate what she's actually delivering in her legacy.
In Holly's memory, her family founded the Holly Gazzard Trust, one set up to help combat domestic violence. Those who knew her raise awareness of the issues behind her murder.
So I started with the Holly Gazzard Trust in March last year, and I started off just doing admin work, but as it went on, I've progressed and I now do the training and events. So I go into schools and colleges and communities and teach on healthy relationships, coercive control, knife crime and stalking. We share Holly's story and then we go on to the subject matter and the signs and things to look out for, and then what you can do about it. And we also signpost to where you can get help if you're experiencing it.
It was his own distorted view of relationships that made Maslin a dangerous individual.
I'm now the Force's tactical lead for domestic abuse and stalking and harassment. And part of that, my drive, is that the passion from Holly's case and being involved in that and seeing the effect of domestic homicide, and to make sure that we get it right. It's really important that we do get these cases right.
Maslin was naive to believe detectives would not uncover his previous convictions and surveillance footage that confirmed his plan for murder was premeditated. His history of abuse and forensic evidence linking him to the murder weapon made Maslin change his plea to guilty. The sheer weight of the case against him meant that he could not get away with murder. It all proved to be a killer's mistake.